Okay, all right, all right.
Hello! if you are just joining
Hey,
us, we are glad to have you with us. This is uh, not our first take, but we're
it's
here
too
now.
soon.
We're here now.
Too
So
soon to talk about it. Too soon to talk
it
about
is.
it.
I'm sorry.
But
I'm sorry,
we're
but
here.
we are here now.
Without further ado, welcome to the Running the Race podcast. I am Dan Lee. This is Matthew. And we are two disciples, two followers of Christ who are running the race to meet Jesus at the finish line. And we are here to help you talk about topics that can help you keep your pace with Jesus. And so that is the Running the Race podcast. We are dedicated to talk about some pretty uh, topical stuff, daily, practical things that maybe we don't get to talk about very often. At least maybe me and Matthew feel that way.
Yep.
So that's it. Uh, um, Matthew, how's your New Year been so far, man?
So far, it's been good. There hasn't been a whole lot going on. We've done a lot of renovation work to our backyard, which has been nice. When my wife's family was in town for the holidays, we got to go out and kind of change some things up in our backyard. So I'm tired and sore because I've carried in about 35 bags of gravel at this point. But it was worth it because it looks really nice. And best part of all, my wife is really pleased about it. So happy wife, happy life.
Yes, I need to do something like that in the backyard, but we'll see when that happens.
Well, it's not always easy. But how about
Yeah,
you?
no,
How's your New Year's going so far?
it's going pretty good. Aside from having to re-record this,
Well, yeah, but that's okay.
technical
Just
difficulties,
means more
but
time that we could spend talking to each other, which is worth
that's
it.
right. That's right. Just to have that excuse again. Yeah, it's going pretty good. I mean, I feel like it feels like 2025.
Yeah,
I'm depressed. Christmas is over. It feels like it went by too fast.
I would agree.
And I'm planning to take down Christmas decorations outside tonight.
Oh, that's sad.
It's very depressing. It's
That
very
is
sad.
sad.
Very depressing. But with our conversation of the new year, most people are thinking and talking about their different habits that they have, different goals and resolutions, and so on. So that is going to be a very prevalent thing and predominant thing that most people are thinking and talking about around this time.
Mm.
So we decided to dedicate our first episode, round of applause, for the first episode, to spiritual habits. But I do want to make mention, at least so far, I mean, we've gotten pretty good reception,
Yep.
really good support. Now that support may taper off, as we go on. But no, so far we do want to say thank you for those who have listened to the first episode, who have watched, who have texted us privately,
Yep.
commented on Facebook and other areas. It's encouraging to us. It I mean, it helps us run this race of podcasting because this is a new area that me and Matthew are navigating, and so
It's
it's super
also
encouraging.
it is the encouragement is really so it means so much. Just
Yeah,
because we're jumping into new territory here, it's kind of an unfamiliar. We're working through the bugs as they come. But the fact that we've got people that are here that are listening that are wanting to be engaged and involved, that means so much to us. So we appreciate you guys tuning in.
yeah. Um, Even if it's things you've already heard about, even things that you know about already, we hope that we can maybe bring some reminder to whatever it is, whatever topic, and just help you. I mean, and make it feel like there's somebody you're chatting with us, in some way to help that. I've always found that beneficial with podcasts, and so on. But for this episode, hopefully the mailman doesn't come. Hopefully the phones don't ring, and that's what happens in our church buildings
Yep.
is the secretary's gone, it falls on the preacher, and the preacher is then running reception,
Yep.
running interference, but anyway, We hope that doesn't happen this time around. That's my fault. But
It's
anyway,
okay. It's okay.
uh, going back to the topic of spiritual habits is kind of what we're going to focus on today. But at least with the idea, let's go ahead and define a habit. I think most of us know what it is. Most of us have an idea of what it looks like and so on. But let's go ahead and define that. Matthew, how would you define a habit in your terminology?
I'd say habits are those things that we have established in our lives that are almost routine. They're ritual. We do them without thinking about them.
Yeah.
They are intertwined with our daily life in a way where it's just normal. And I don't know if I want to say expected, but you know when the habit has not taken place. If a routine is messed up in some way, you're very much aware of it. And
Yeah.
there's different types of habits. There are habits that are just brought about through living life, and there are habits that are more brought into life intentionally, things that we challenge ourselves to try to do and to try to work on. So habits can take a variety of different forms, but I would say in general, they're just the things that we have in our lives that we do without even really thinking about it. It's become just part of who we are.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Sorry, I had to spilled my drink. Um, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. Where it's almost second nature. You're you're not thinking about it,
Hmm.
uh, or you're not thinking about it as long, right? It's kind of you just go and do it. There may
Right.
be some resistance, but you do it,
Right.
right? I think about a habit as well being something that's hard to get rid of, something
Mhm.
that's hard to stop. And so I think we can apply this to bad habits, right? I think each and every one of us have a bad habit of doing something
Right.
that maybe scrolling too much on social media,
Snoozing the
TikTok,
alarm too many
Instagram.
times.
Yeah, snoozing an alarm too many times, whatever you name it, but that's something that is hard to stop, right? That is a habit that has been formed. It's hard for you to stop.
Hmm.
And then obviously on the other side of the spectrum, the good ones, those are what you form. Those are hard to stop. But also circumstantial habits, like those are formed because of like I have a 9 to 5. Your
Hmm.
job, uh, family, all those stuff is you and I. We all have habits in one way, shape, or form,
And
and
those
so
habits, part of why I would say they're difficult to stop is because they're comfortable. We have developed the routine of doing them, and we are creatures of habit and of routine. So if you start off being someone that snoozes your alarm several times, that's what you're comfortable doing. And
right,
you often sleep in too late.
yeah,
And so it's comfortable. They're convenient because that's just how we've set our lives to go. So breaking that routine and throwing in a curveball into that can really derail, because it takes us from our comfort zone to somewhere outside of that, and
right,
we don't like that very much. So we want to
right.
stay where we feel the most comfortable, where we feel the least vulnerable, so we continue doing the same things in the same ways.
Yeah, yeah, and we can almost be slaves to convenience,
Hmm.
and we are very ingrained in a convenient world right now with technology and other things, right? And so, uh, having inconveniences or inconveniencing ourselves, is difficult.
Yeah.
But why these are so important, is I think in my estimation is because we are beings of rhythm. So God has created us to have habitual lifestyles, and through that we are limited,
Mm.
on our time, on our ability, and things like that. So understanding that this is a distinct feature that God has distilled in us, right, and instilled in us, rather, not distilled. But anyway,
Yeah.
uh, is something to really understand and to take note of, and
Mhm.
to see, okay, I'm a habitual creature by nature. That's how I was created. Then I need to capitalize, or I need to um, be able to be intentional
Yeah.
with the habits that I create, and so on. Yeah, so I think that's important. I guess in addition to that, what we talk about physical habits, right? Um, Probably we kind of listed it out a little bit, or get an idea. Waking up early,
Mhm.
or setting alarm, not snoozing that
Right.
alarm. Other physical habits people have are like going to the gym,
Mhm.
eating better, monitoring sleep, you name it, whatever fills in the blank. We know what that looks like, but what about spiritual ones? What would we say a spiritual habit looks like? How would you, in your mind, how does that look like?
Well, I think a lot of the spiritual habits take the same forms as those physical habits. They're just on a spiritual level, right? So if a
Yeah,
physical habit is something that we do physically without even really thinking about it, a spiritual habit is the same thing, just on a spiritual level. It's these things that we do spiritually that we don't even really thinking about. We don't do without thinking about it. I
right,
would say that spiritual habits are harder to form and to establish than physical habits because we are physical beings. We live in a physical world. And as a result of that, we are often focused more heavily on the physical things than on the spiritual things, which makes the challenge of working to establish a spiritual routine sometimes just more tricky.
right. Yeah, to add to that, because we're physical beings, you feel whenever something's off.
Mm,
Uh, like your sleep schedule's off, you're going to feel that the next day,
right.
right? You don't get a good amount of sleep, just in general. You're going to feel that you miss a daily walk or something, or the normal time you would normally go to the gym or something like that. You feel that, or if you're inactive, you're going to feel that. Your body's going to take effect,
Hmm.
right? And so, we don't get that, let's just say, benefit in a way, feel that spiritually, or we don't uh, notice that as much as we do physically. And
Or at
so that
least,
makes it
yeah,
really
you at
hard.
least don't notice it as directly. I think we could
Right.
say we
Yeah.
do still feel an impact from those things, but it's not on the same level. It's
Yes.
much more of a
Right.
mental level, and I mean a spiritual level than the physical things. Both are incredibly important, and we need to recognize the fact that our physical lives and our spiritual lives are intertwined, um, and so trying to establish those spiritual routines and those spiritual habits will
Right.
affect our physical life, and I would say would benefit our spiritual and physical life. It's
Absolutely.
just it's
Right.
harder to necessarily set those when we tend to focus more heavily on the physical.
Right.
But as far as some specific spiritual habits that I think would come to mind, I there's several that I think we could say, but I think the most common ones would be daily Bible reading, praying, meditation, service,
Right.
those types
Yeah.
of things that are the typical answer of what are the things that you would want to improve on in your spiritual life. Well, I want to try to read my Bible more. I want to start trying to pray more. I want to try to be more servant hearted. I want to be more encouraging. Those types of things I think would be the general ones that most people would consider.
Yeah. I think about around this time, a lot of people are picking up yearly plans
Hmm.
in the Bible. I've seen some people where they'll pick up different translations and read through the entire Bible in a year, and do that. I think in some ways people are thinking about what they can do, and what can they. Most people are thinking about what they can do and improve on spiritually like that. And those probably the two things that come to mind is daily Bible reading, or prayers. in regard to that. Um, but even within those spiritual habits and those things, I mean, obviously, um, there's more connected to
Mhm.
that. As you said, it's not just the physical versus the spiritual, right? I mean, in one way it's the world versus, God,
Right.
right? But our physical habits are connected to our spiritual well-being
Hmm.
and spiritual life too. And so it's another big layer as to why this is important to consider. But also, one thing that I think about is, what habits did Jesus have?
Mm.
Yeah. And so there's been different writers that have come to this approach. Like John Mark Comer has written a book called Practicing the Way,
Hmm.
like the way Jesus interacts. It's the way of living, and things like that. And he kind of highlights some things like this. But uh, Mark 135 is a big one. And that's kind of the first place I think about when we're talking about habits is, um, what did Jesus do? Right? We kind of put an acronym. What would Jesus do, in a situation? But what did he do? Right? Just in his daily life.
Right.
And Mark is great because it's written with the perspective of Jesus being busy. You have the most miracles that are written
Mm.
in the Gospel of Mark. So he's a busy guy in his ministry.
Right.
And Mark really emphasizes that and is appealing to Roman society. But you look at Mark 135, it says, now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out, departed to a solitary place. There he prayed. Why is this important for us as Christians to talk about? Why is this important for us in running the race? Because Jesus had habits.
Hmm.
And that's something we got to take note of. That's something we need to understand. And I asked this question in our first recording. But where did Jesus learn this? Where did he learn this habit? It's just intriguing to me. The humanity of Christ, obviously his deity is something to take awe of, but his humanity is something to take awe of too.
Yeah.
Of where did he learn this?
Hmm.
Obviously he's God. He knew what the right thing to do all the time, but I'm curious if he learned this from his dad,
Yeah.
right? If you learned this from Joseph. And why is this even more important is because obviously it's a multi-layered thing. It's like a nice little cake, right? Where you have our physical habits affect our spiritual ones, but then even more so, another layer to that is it doesn't affect just us individually. It also affects other people.
Yeah.
This is all conjecture, by the way, for those listening. This is all for fun to think about.
Yeah.
This is what makes the Bible fun, is thinking about these things, at least for me. Is if Jesus learned this, what if Jesus learned this habit from Joseph,
Hmm.
right? And how Jesus as a child was observing his dad. Maybe he got up early, departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed,
Yeah.
right? So you have another layer of legacy and setting the example, you know. You and I, as husbands and dads, if we did this, or if we had a habit, something like this around the same time, it'd be like clockwork around that,
Hmm.
around it, or just set the expectation of the standard. Our kids are going to say and think, oh, my dad did this around this time of day, around, every day or whatever, he did this,
Right.
right? And
And
that's monumental.
that setting the example, regardless of where Jesus learned that habit or had that example, Jesus is setting the example
Uh-huh.
right
Yep.
there,
That's
in
right.
showing spiritual habits are something that we can and ought to form. Um, to think about the amount of time that Jesus spent with people, it would be overwhelming.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so he grounds himself in the early in the morning when it was still dark to go off and be by himself to spend some time with God, and that
Yeah.
became a routine, that
Right.
became habitual to him. and he has set the example for us as, his children. Look at what you can do.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated you bringing that up, because I hadn't really thought about that before, but it's exactly what it is. He is giving us an example of a spiritual habit and how it can be formed and the benefit from it.
Yeah. And it's not only that too. It's intriguing to me that his disciples knew where to find him.
Right.
Like the Mount of Olives was a key place that he went to,
Mm-hmm.
where it's talked about the mount in which he prayed, right? Um, and you could see that in Luke's gospel. You see that a little bit in Mark and all the other gospels. But he set habits.
Yeah.
People knew where to find him. It's where Judas knew where to find him.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the garden, and so on. That they knew, they watched him, they observed his habits, what he did, and
Yeah.
were able to expect that, right?
Yep.
And so you have this cool, intriguing thing about Jesus that brings him closer, I think,
Mm-hmm.
makes him way more relatable. Um, and that's part of his humanity, is so that we can relate, or
Yeah.
he can relate to us, right? And then through that, we relate to him
Yeah.
in just who he is, and ultimately understand God more through that. But in addition to what we're talking about too, Matthew has picked out a text for us that he has observed, and he's mulled over, and he's an expert in this text, absolute scholar. uh, but is a text that he thought about in regard to habits and our topic today. And I was not expecting this passage with our topic today. So this is a lesson for you folks. Where you think of passages of scripture and topics is going to be different for somebody else. And that may leave you scratching your head, but you learned something from it. So I was also scratching my head in regard, because I thought he texted me and said John 3. And I was so lost. I didn't know. Like, I don't see what he's saying. But anyway,
Nicodemus needed to have some spiritual habits.
that's true. He did. He absolutely did. But First John 3 is what we're going to talk about. And so Matthew, First John 3. Yeah. Matthew, walk us through the context. What's going on in this letter, and what's happening in First John 3?
So overall, the context of First John, you've got the problem of these false teachers that are coming in that are causing chaos in the church. And you've got these people that are coming saying that Jesus didn't come in the flesh, or Jesus isn't the Son of God, and completely derailing people's faith. And so John is writing this to help these true Christians to see that what they have been taught, what they're now living in, is true, and that they can have confidence that what they have is true. There's a cool thread throughout the book of the phrase, "By this you may know," or "By this we may know." That he is wanting them to see and to truly understand and have confidence in what they have been given through the apostles, through the prophets, about Jesus, and that the life that they're living is the life that they're meant to live. I really think that First John as a whole is a set of tests. The main well-known verse, at least a main well-known verse in First John, is in chapter 4, the test the spirits. I think First John is comprised of a series of tests to help these Christians to see who's truly a child of God and who's not a child of God, in order to give confidence to those who are children of God of, we know that we're where we need to be. We know that what these false teachers are coming and telling is not true, and we're not going to listen to them. We're not going to continue having this relationship with them, because we know that what we have in God and in Christ is what we need to. So with all of that in mind, we get to chapter 3, and he starts off by noting the fact, see how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called children of God, and such we are. So again, he's grounding us and remembering the fact that we are indeed children of God, which is a big deal for the book as a whole. He wants to express who the children of God are and help them to see who they are. But then as we keep going through this section, really it starts verse 4, but then really picks up in verse 7. The idea of everyone who practices sin practices lawlessness. That idea of practicing is going to keep coming up. We see it down in verse 7. Make sure no one deceives you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who practices sin is of the devil. The Son of Man appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. No one born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin because he's been born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. So you've got this whole section that's talking about practice. And
Yeah.
I know the word habit never shows up, but that's what he's talking about. The word practice there literally means doers, doers of sin, doers of righteousness. So are you doing sin? Are you doing righteousness? And this trouble that we come to when we come to this section is we read some of these verses, and he says, back in verse 9, no one who is born of God practices sin. And I look at that and say, well, okay, I've been born of God, but I practice sin. I'm still sinful. I still do the things that I know I'm not supposed to do. So I guess I'm not truly born of God. And we set this mindset of, okay, well, if we mess up, then that's it. We're done. But that's not what John is talking about here. When he's talking about practicing sin or practicing righteousness, he's talking about, is that what we are working toward? Are we willfully continuing on in sin? If we are, then we're showing that we're not truly born of God. But the children of God are those who are practicing righteousness. They're setting themselves on a path that's going to keep leading them toward righteousness. Not meaning that they're going to be perfectly righteous from that day forward, but they are working to become more and more righteous each and every day. It all comes down to that idea of doing. What are we doing in our lives? Have we set our lives on a path that is pointed more towards sin and we habitually are going down that road? Or are we habitually setting ourselves on a path that's leading toward righteousness and toward God? That's how we can tell who's truly children of God. Is children of God are those who are setting themselves on the path of trying to follow righteousness each and every day.
Yeah. I think that's a really good overview of First John. But also when you look at 1 through 10 of chapter 3 as well, just kind of what I'm observing here is, if you are righteous, if you are a child of God, or one of his children, as the seen in verse 2, and practicing righteousness, that instills confidence in you. And when we have habits down, when we talk about habits, we gain more confidence in whatever we're doing, right? At first, it's going to feel, daunting and, and difficult, and you're going to feel very inadequate. But as you continue on and press further and familiarize yourself, it increases your confidence. In fact, that's what he says in chapter 2, 28 and 29, right? It just says, and now little children abide in him, that when he appears, we may have confidence and not be ashamed before him at his coming. And then that connects to verse 2 of chapter 3, or verse 3 of chapter 3, sorry. No, verse 2. Beloved, now we are children of God, has not been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is, right? So the things that I do, like you mentioned, right? practicing righteousness, not practicing sin, going this direction of lawlessness, and so on. My daily race and righteousness and awareness of that and living that out, it builds confidence to when Jesus, does reveal himself,
Right.
right? Return. I have confidence and assurance
Mm.
in regard to that. And so, even more so, why is spiritual habits important is because you're going to be confident and who you are in Christ. You're going to be confident in Him as well.
Right.
And so I think First John does a good job of illustrating that. And as he chose in First John 3, guys, not John 3, First John 3.
First John 3.
It demonstrates that. It demonstrates that is you're either going to be practicing righteousness or you're not, and it's all consistent on what habits you're forming and what you're doing.
And with those things, we have to learn how to do that. It's not something that just comes instinctively. We have to make the choice to practice righteousness. Both are choices.
Right.
We have the choice to practice sin, or we have the choice to practice righteousness. We have to make that choice. It's a matter of which do we more often choose. I think that's part of the habit of it is if we continue to choose doing the things that go against what God has told us to do, then that's going to be the path that we continue down on. Whereas if we make the choice to go after God and go after righteousness, it's going to take effort and it's going to take work, but that will help us more and more down the road, even if we don't necessarily think that it will at the start.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I wholeheartedly agree. And it goes back to what you said when we were talking about why they're so hard is because it's uncomfortable. It's hard work, right? We want the easy route.
Right.
And you look at what he's more so talking about as well. I see it in verse 4, but you look at verse 4, whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness, right? Or practices lawlessness, right? It's this habitual living and consistent results in action and choice that you're making, right? But basically, in essence, what's happening is the description that's being referred to is someone who's living the way they want to, that's not holding any standard, and who is deciding to do whatever they want. That's what, at least when we take the illustration, that's what criminals do.
Yeah.
And so that is referring to, whether or not we're going to live by the standard God has prescribed for us, or live by our, standard of self, if you will, by rejecting that.
Well, recognizing that that's what we used to do, right? Before we became Christians, before we came to Christ, we lived the way that we wanted to live. We did the things that we wanted to do and didn't really think about the consequences of it. It's not until we come to Christ that we see that there is a change that has to be made. And that change is not going to just miraculously happen. We have to put the work into it. I think about Paul over in Ephesians chapter 4, talking about taking off the old self and putting on the new. Well, the old self is comfortable. The old self is what we used to do. It's hard to give up what we've been used to for so long. But there's something better that we now have the ability to take hold of through Christ. But we have to be willing to do that, to put it on, to seek to live toward righteousness, which is where these spiritual habits help in that process. If we set righteousness as our goal, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, how do I get to righteousness? How do I become more of a righteous individual? Which is where we need the practicality side of it, where we start setting the process in place.
Well, I even like that example that you brought up in Ephesians 4, where Paul is listing off, hey, to the man who's stealing, let him no longer steal, but let him work with his hands, right? So that's this it's this illustration that he goes back and forth with different examples to say, look, you used to do this, or the person that used to do this, here's a better way to do it. Right. So you think about bad habits versus good habits, is a bad habit can only be replaced with something better. Right. For us to, to have more awareness in what we eat, how we eat, or if we say, well, my goal is to stop eating unhealthy food, right? um, and uh, the best way to do that is to replace it with something better,
Right.
Things that actually are nutrient dense, that keep you full, all that stuff, right? The same thing spiritually is, we're living for self, we're doing things we're having bad habits, if you will. But ultimately there's a better way to replace that and do that.
But recognizing that we need to replace it with something, the physical point that you were making is a valid one. If I tell myself I'm going to spend less time scrolling on my phone, but I never fill my time with doing something else, I'm just going to revert back to the way that I used to do things.
Right.
I'm going to start scrolling on my phone again.
You don't take any action to have any barriers either.
Right.
Well, I'm just going to not scroll on my phone anymore, but
I'm going to keep there. Yeah, I'm going to keep Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and everything right there on my home screen to where I conveniently do it. And you go back to it without thinking about it. I find myself doing that all the time. If I'm telling myself I'm not going to get on Facebook, I'm not going to get on Instagram, I will find myself still just opening my phone and immediately touching the Facebook app.
Yeah.
Because that's the routine that I've set.
Yeah. You ever gotten a notification on your phone, or like phantom notifications on your phone?
Yes. All the time.
Like just this initial instinctual need to grab your phone.
Yes. And there are times where I feel my pocket buzz when my phone's not even in my pocket.
Yeah.
Because we are so routine in, I need this. Oh, this is what I'm used to. This is what I'm comfortable with. So that's just what I'm going to keep doing. Right. We can do that when it comes to sin, where we choose to go down that path because it's the path that we're used to. But when we're made aware of, I need to make a change here, I don't want to continue doing these things, that's the starting point. But we got to continue on with that to give us something that will help us make those changes necessary. Recognizing that you want to form a habit is the starting point, but actually forming the habit is what is often much harder, because it takes the work, it takes the discipline, it takes the self-control.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. Is there anything else with 1 John 3 you want to add?
No, that's really the biggest thing there. Just that overall idea of practicing righteousness versus practicing sin. It's something that is a choice that must be done, that over time, one way or another, will become routine. If we choose to practice sin, that's going to be the routine that we set. But if we choose righteousness, that's going to be the habit that is set in place.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And that really ties in to, I kind of have a little outline that I did, that we went over. And, but I noticed this is how, at least in the New King James Version, it says, behold, what manner of love. I think other translations, like the New American Standard, says, see how great a love the Father has given us.
Right.
So how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, or what manner of love has he bestowed on us? He's reflecting God's character and his actions, right? In what he's doing here. And so obviously that is fulfilled in Christ because we're children of God through him.
Right.
And so as I consider my habits and my lifestyle, righteousness, is a reflection of doing, or of acknowledging and reflecting the great love that God has given us. And by living in a righteous way and following him, we're reflecting that love to him, right? But even in my habits, am I living in a way that is reflecting God's love for me? When I think about the things that I have, the things that I'm able to do, um, you know, just so much that I can do that I'm blessed with. Are we using the things that are we living in a way that reflects that?
Yeah.
That God has given all these things to us, and even spiritually as well. Are we living in a way that is habitually um, capitalizing on that? Not in a negative way, but to really understand and take appreciation of that. I think most of us, we have the desire to do that, and it's just a matter of how.
Hmm.
How do we do that, right? And thinking of it. And so, secondly, I thought of this that I noticed is that your actions follow awareness.
Yeah.
So, take for instance, you look at verse 2, and you see in verses 2 through 3, where, beloved, now we are children of God. It has not been yet revealed what we shall be, but we know. So there's we know again that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself, just as he is pure. But you really uh, look closer on know there is like you said, he's going to use that word that you may know, right?
Hmm.
Over and over again. I like in verse 29, chapter 2, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who practices righteousness is born of him. Um, so he's appealing to what they already know, right?
Right.
It's conditional. Like, well, if you know this, this is how you're going to live. This is what you're going to do, right? I think of like in Ephesians 4 when he says, "If you live this way, you have not been taught. It's not been so. You've been taught by Christ." Exactly the wording, but what he's appealing is if you're living in a way like you previously lived as the old man, Jesus didn't teach you that,
Right.
right? So you know better is almost essentially what he's saying in a way. But when you think about habits, is I'm usually aware of what I lack.
Mm.
I'm usually aware of what I need to do. My actions should follow suit
Yeah.
of that awareness.
Yeah.
So I know that Jesus is righteous. I know that he's faithful. Is my life going to reflect that? That's the choice I have to make, right?
Right.
Um, and so when I think about this, am I really putting into place um, to make what I know achievable and sustainable?
Mm.
And so when you look at that spiritually, I know I need to read my Bible more. I know I need to pray more. I'm aware of those things. What am I doing to make that achievable?
Right.
What am I doing that to make that sustainable for myself? Um, and so when you think about habits, even more so, is I think about this too, and I just mentioned it, but are my habits reflecting God's love for me and imaging Him and imaging that love, or is it imaging self? Am I living like the man of lawlessness,
Mm.
or am I living like the man of righteousness? Right. And so those two ideas come together, um, you know, because you're going to choose one or the other, like you said.
Yeah.
But I think when we understand, I mean, obviously we got to do something, right? You can't just be aware and then not do anything,
Hmm.
and then have a pity party that you're not where you want to be, right?
Right.
But when we think about spiritual habits, is we have to take action. And so, what are we doing? What are we doing with that? Um,
I really like that idea of the awareness is followed by action, because there does have to be an awareness of a need to change. We do that when
right.
it comes to the physical habits that we set. We think about the resolutions, 9 times out of 10, if someone's New Year's resolution is, I'm going to go start working out more, it's because they have an awareness that they're overweight or they think that they're
Yeah.
overweight.
Right.
Um,
Or
so
they just want to feel better and all
sure,
this
they want
stuff.
to feel better,
Right.
but there's some sort of awareness of, I have this problem that I want to change. I have this situation in my life that I want to
Right.
improve. That's the starting point. And I always like the Alcoholics Anonymous first step mantra, whatever you want to call it. The first step on the road to recovery is admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah.
We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be willing to say, there are things in my life that I want to change. If we never say that, if we never admit to that, then we're never going to change. And as a matter of fact,
Right.
just earlier in First John, when John is starting off this book, he's noting the fact, if we say that we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, then we lie and we don't practice the truth. If we say that we have no sin, we're deceiving ourselves. If we say that we've never sinned, then we make him a liar and the truth is not in us. Those are things that, if we're blind to the problems, there's never going to be any correction made.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
have to start by admitting that we have things that we need to change.
Right.
But following that admittance has to be action that is attainable to make those changes, which is where when we set these goals of, I want to try to be more of a spiritual person. I want to be more, in depth in my Bible reading. I want to be someone that's more, focused on prayer in my life. We can set the goal of, okay, so if I want to be better at Bible reading, then I want to spend an hour out of my day reading scripture. That's a great goal, but how achievable is that going to be?
Right.
Am I setting the bar too high where first couple days it works out great, but then by day 3 I'm like, I just don't have an hour to spend today doing this, so I can't do it. My goal is all messed up, it's all gone, and everything that I did is for nothing, and I fall back to the same routine that I used to do.
Right.
We need the action that's attainable in order to keep the habit going.
Or realistic action.
Yeah.
Right. Because, with that goal, with that example you just brought up, I want to read an hour a day. An hour is a long time.
It is.
And sometimes, just with all the other things that happen in life, an hour is hard to find just to sit and read sometimes. Some days are better than others, right? So if we have this goal, I'm going to read an hour a day. Great. If you can make time, do it. If you need to wake up early, like we read in Mark 1:35, 100% do it, right? But also understand that when we have these standards and these goals, is sometimes we're not going to be able to fully achieve that, and that is just because our life happens. We have young kids. Sometimes they don't wake up. They wake up and sleep in, right? My kids sure don't, but they're always awake at 6, right?
Ugh.
Around those lines.
That's
They're
miserable.
6:30. Sometimes they'll sleep in until 7.
That's
right?
miserable.
But that's like once in a year that they actually sleep in, right? Most of my time is either, where me and Chloe actually have, freedom to do whatever we want, have some peace and quiet, isn't until like 9 or 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm sleepy. I want to go to bed.
Yeah.
But, just whatever time you can find, that's great. But some of us really only have like maybe 15 minutes to read, to study, to pray. And so if we run in with this mentality, like, I want to read an hour a day, we need to be okay that we're going to fail in that. And we need to understand that it may be better to pull the expectation back a little bit. But just with the idea, anything is better than nothing. Presence and consistency is so important to understand. And so that's part of what makes it hard, is we have this mental block. I appreciate people that have this standard and want to stick to the standard. You set a standard, you should hold that standard.
Right.
Right. But you need to understand what kind of standard you're setting for yourself.
Yeah.
Is it achievable? Is it sustainable or not?
And are you willing to give yourself some grace in that? I think too many times we set the expectation so high that we can't reach it. And then we're down and we're hard on ourselves because I told myself I was going to spend an hour in prayer. I told myself I was going to spend 30 minutes in prayer, and I didn't do it. And man, I'm
not a righteous person. I'm not spiritually minded, right? Because I can't do this, right?
And I tell myself I can't do this. And as a result, nothing changes. So
Right.
I've always found it is far better to start with a lower expectation on yourself. Not to not to say we shouldn't challenge ourselves, but challenge ourselves realistically. To say, okay, if I
Right.
want to improve in my prayer life, start with spending 10 minutes in prayer and do that for a period of time until
Right.
that becomes more of a routine thing. And then once that's more of a routine, challenge yourself to 15, to 20, to
Right.
30, and it keeps progressing where ultimately you reach the goal of I'm going to be praying for an hour out of the day.
Yeah.
That's by far achievable, but you set some road markers in place in order to make that happen. No one that says I'm going to run a marathon gets up off their couch and then just runs 26.2 miles. It
I
just doesn't
appreciate the exact number
it
for
it
the
doesn't
marathon there.
it doesn't happen, right? You
Yeah.
have to
No.
set some road marks in place in order to build up that habit and that
Right.
process.
In the running world, it's usually recommended that you only increase mileage by like 10%
Yeah.
every week.
Because otherwise you're
If you
going to
go
burn
in,
yourself out or you're going
yeah,
to
you're gonna
just
feel terrible yourself and you're gonna hate it.
yeah. And you're not going
Yeah.
to want to continue it because
No.
you're
Yeah.
telling yourself this is an unachievable goal.
Right. And so that's why we need to start off slow. Like some people may very well like just out of the get-go be able to sit down, read the Bible for an hour,
Sure.
and just no hindrance or no obstacle for them. It's just easy for them, right? For most people, that's not the case,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some people have really good genetics to just walk into the gym and just be instantaneously strong,
Right.
right? And do whatever, bench 225, all this stuff. Most people aren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to understand we need to pace ourselves a little bit, right? And so this is what's really kind of misunderstood in some ways, and just in my opinion, of spiritual growth is that when we talk about growing spiritually and wanting people to grow spiritually, it's almost as if we want them to go from 0 to 100 in like a week.
Yes.
That's not going to happen.
No.
It may be like some people may go 0 to like 50, right?
Right.
That's just who they are. That's just how they work. That's just how they operate. Things click faster. They're able to form things quicker, and that's just who they are. Other people, it's like 0 to 5, 0 to 10, every other week and stuff, right?
And
So,
we have to understand that growth takes time. And I think
yeah,
we do understand that when it comes to physical things. I mean, I look at my daughter Cassidy, just turned 1. You know, I cannot expect her to be going out driving a car or, going and buying the groceries and whatnot.
yeah,
She doesn't have that capability. She has not grown into those abilities yet. Will she down the line? Sure. But growth is a process that happens. And no
yeah,
one in their right mind would place a full adult expectation on a toddler because it's
yeah,
not going to happen. And yet we do that
right,
all the time with spiritual toddlers, with spiritual
right.
babies, where we
Ooh, I
get them
like
into
that.
the
Spiritual
water.
babies.
We get them into the water. Help them start their relationship with God. And then from that point on, we say, all right, have fun. Good luck. And
Yeah,
we don't help them to see how they can grow and help them
right.
to grow ourselves.
Yeah,
We've got to be willing to recognize growth does not happen overnight. And
yeah,
so, as a result of that, thinking about our lives, don't set your expectation that you are going to completely do a 180 in your life overnight. It's going to be a process that takes place, and we're not always going to have it
right,
right. But are we setting our path toward righteousness? Are we setting our minds to
right,
practice righteousness
right.
continually?
I think you make a 180 in the decision to do different.
Mm-hmm.
Like at least the illustration we give of repentance is you're making a 180, right?
Right.
You're deciding to go the opposite direction of where you were going. And um to get to the actual destination you want to get, that takes time
Mm-hmm.
and much slower than we want it to. But I also think in regard to making sure we're okay and not placing high standards on ourselves is, or unachievable goals,
Mm-hmm.
is understanding that God doesn't do that to us.
Right.
And and when we understand that, I mean, the daunting aspect of Christianity is just being like Christ, right? But even then, God isn't having his finger on the trigger ready to shoot us down
Mm-hmm.
when we fail, when we mess up. He 100% understands that we're going to fail,
Right.
that we're going to make a mistake, right? That's why you reference, I mean, 1 John 1, 7 through 9, 7 through 10, and then even 1 John 2, 1 through 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
I write to you so that you may not sin, but if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous, right?
Right.
Jesus knows, God knows, that's part of grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to also give ourselves grace when we fall short in our own standard, in our own standard that we give, that we're not going to be perfect, that if it's just simply present and consistent, no matter the duration of time, no matter what it is, that's way better than nothing.
Yeah.
And I can glorify God and be content with that, and I can still grow from that.
Yep.
So I think that is really key to spiritual habits. If you're listening to this podcast and you're kind of wanting a how to, form spiritual habits, I guess, or like a step 1, step 2, step 3, we're not going to be able to give that to you.
And we're not going to be able to give that to you because it's going to be different for everyone.
Absolutely.
I mean, and
Right.
that's where it goes back to the growth idea that we were just talking about. My growth is because of what I put into it. Your growth is because of what you put into it. Certainly, we can have people around us that help us in that process, but the habits that we form are based off of what we do. It's not something you can just say, okay, step 1, step 2. I've tried to do that with other people. I've tried to have people tell me what they do to help me improve. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work because that was something that works great for them, but I'm not them. I have to look at my life and find the things that work for me to establish those spiritual habits. And it's the same for all of us.
The only thing that I could probably say, and like I said, like you said, it's different for everybody. But I mean, well, running the race, everybody's running pace is different, right? A lot of people are way faster than me, and they just been more experienced, right? We talked about that in our episode 0, our introduction to the podcast. But one thing that I can say that was helpful for me in understanding habits and improving my relationship and is this confidence that we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what habits do. They give you confidence in who you are and your ability, but most importantly, spiritually, in who God is.
Yeah.
Is what really shaped my mind is relying and leaning more and dwelling more on God's grace and that gift that he's given me, right? Through Christ, but how he supplies that and how that's sufficient for me to understand.
Yeah.
Right. And to possess, which is why he tells Paul that in 2 Corinthians 12. My grace is sufficient enough for you. Even if I get 15 minutes a day of reading my Bible or whatever time I can put in that day, that's sufficient.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We should desire more, 100%.
Sure.
Right.
And I think we can challenge ourselves.
That's not a 1-to-1 ratio between, Bible reading and God's grace. God's grace is 100% sufficient no matter what. Right. But it's the understanding of, okay, I'm satisfied. I was able to at least do that. I can grow from that.
Yep.
And God can work through me through that with that time, and dedicate that heart. But I think we need to dedicate a whole lot more to the grace of God in regard to our personal lives and dwelling on that more. And I think when we do that, it is going to help us grow exponentially and help us increase and help us in our habits. And I don't think that's given enough credit that
Yeah.
we should ponder more and consider.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you got to add?
No, I think that's it. I think that's a pretty good place for us to stop for this first episode. And just recognizing that this is the trajectory that we're trying to follow down for the rest of at least the next several episodes, maybe even the whole season.
Right.
Just trying to help us to see how we can establish some of these spiritual habits, what some of these are, and how we can work to set ourselves on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. And if if you are struggling with developing habits, just know that you're not alone in regard to that.
Yep.
Matthew and I can fully attest to the difficulty of forming spiritual habits, and I think we're still even struggling with that.
Yeah.
You know, of doing that, but realize that no matter how slow your race is or how fast you're running, even if you're walking in the race,
You're still making progress.
You're still making progress, right? Walking, if you need to stop and walk, that's fine.
Yep.
You're still making progress, but that's key is consistent growth.
Yep.
And don't set the expectation that you need to, have these monumental achievements and goals. Set those goals, but realize it's going to take longer. The bigger the goal, the longer it takes to get there.
Yep.
But so long as you're making progress, and that's what God really wants, is He wants you to grow, but He understands how limited we are in those things, and we need to understand that as well. God just simply wants growth, and I see that throughout Scripture. It can be monumental at times, it can be very, very low, but growth is growth.
Yep.
So, all right, man. If there's nothing else you want to add to that, I think it was a great conversation. And so, thank you for listening to this podcast. And so, we are going to continue having topics like this, and we hope that you'll join us in keeping our pace with Jesus and running our race with Him to meet Him at the finish line. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.